Hello, this is Mary Harris from Paper Crow. I am using some new video equipment these days, and because of that, I have to voice over because I didn't press all the right buttons when I was making the last video. So I'll do my best to keep up with what I'm doing actually in the video. I apologize for my awkwardness. So I'm making these tucks for 12 by out of 12 by 12 scrapbooking paper. They have notebooks and tucks to put tags in, and I've added bling with some photos and different words. There's a couple flip outs to add a little bit of flavor, and I used 2.5 12 by 12s really about to make it, just to add all the different designs. So I got some paper from Michaels that I have been using for my projects recently. I like a lot of their fall types of papers with butterfly. I don't know, I'm really attracted to the butterfly papers, but I thought I would use this paper for this show because you can still get this paper if you go to Michaels. I think it's called Field Journal. This is an example of how the 12 by 12 is cut, but I tried to do it with like a harder cardstock, and it really just split the paper. It was too much folding for that style. So you really want to stick to a thinner cardstock. So here's the Field Journal paper book that I got from Michaels, and I love these sets because you can pull out colors and designs that go together and makes it pretty simple. I do like the double-sided paper a little bit better, but then sometimes those are too thick. Anyway, so we're going to start off doing the cuts here, and I'll put the measurements up in the corner so that you have them to look at later. But really we're going to be cutting to make one end that's 3 inches, and then the other two sections are 4.5, so it ends up equaling 12. So what I do first is I score down, and then I'll cut in the areas that I need to make the flaps. So I'm going to score down at the 4.5, the 9, and then turn it and do the 4.5 and the 9, and rotate around until I get all the boxes that I need. I can't remember if I cut my finger in this video or not, but you're kind of watching along with me. So 4.5 we're scoring, then we're going to score the 9, and then we're going to rotate it so that we can start making the boxes. So again, we're going to do the 4.5 and the 9. And you can see it makes it a lot easier to bend, so you can start to see the lines forming. And that gives us the 4.5 by 4.5 boxes. Now that I have everything scored, I'm going to decide where I want to have the flaps fall in versus just folding up. So I have here a 4.5 by 3 square, and I'm going to cut just to the corner, and that way that will flap separate from the envelopes, or yeah, you'll see once I have it cut. But we're gonna go down to, you can measure it by lining it up with 7.5 on the scoring board, and cut down, or you can just use the folds. I really use the folds to measure it. That's why I fold it all ahead of time. It's just easier that way. And now I'm going to go over 3 inches and cut just down to the corner, the corner of the folds to make another flap. And this will be our long side that flips up. Now this looks kind of boring now, but when we add the other pages on, it'll start to make more sense and take on some life. So I'm going to end up having an envelope on one end and a tuck in the center, and then a flip up on the end, on the opposite end. So we have a little bit of variety all in one. I just have to decide where I want the butterflies. Do I want them to be on the inside or the outside of my envelopes? Because I'm going to use some paper that complements it. I used 3 different 12 by 12 papers to make all the different pieces for this, and it gives the right amount of diversity. In other words, it gets pretty boring if you just have 2 colors or patterns. So I had to pick out some papers to complement the main page. So I went with another big patterned paper. I'm not using a ton of images on this, so I wanted to use really patterned paper to provide the artistic touch to it. So the original one I did was really mild because I put a lot of bling on it afterwards, but this one is just more basic, so I'm going to let the paper do the talking. So I have to cut the pages to fit a little bit smaller than the squares and rectangles that they're going to be covering. I want to make sure I don't go past the fold, or it has to go just up to the fold, or else it will block the fold. So I'm doing a belly band here, and that one I'm actually, as long as it doesn't overlap where the paper folds down, I'm okay, because there's not going to be anything folding down in that section. But when I go to do the overlap for the envelope, then I have to be more careful about where the folds fall. I'm gonna make the flap for this envelope out of a brown sort of grocery store big paper, just to give it a little bit of contrast, and I can put embellishments on it later. I'm going to cut a 4.5 by 4.5 square with the intention of folding it over, so it'll cover the flap of the envelope, as well as it'll add a little bit of color contrast to the back of the envelope, because we're going to decorate both sides. I'm going to crease the paper ahead of time so that when I go to put it together, it's a nice clean fold. I don't always perfectly line this up, so bear with me here. I'll probably have to make adjustments, but that's what all the embellishments are for, right? If you don't quite line it up, add a little lace. Alright, I'm going to crease this to fit this flap so that it will go over both sides. I'm going to make the fold at the 3-inch mark, and I will fold it or put the crease in on both sides to make sure that the fold will be effective without breaking the paper. You don't have to have this fancy board to do it. You could just measure it out with a ruler if you wanted to. Now, I feel like this is a bit busy and monotonous, so I'm going to add some other papers in. This other butterfly paper will contrast it well. You can see on the original I had 3 different patterns, no, 4 patterns, and then lace and images to break it up. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one. The next thing I'm going to do is cut an edging to show the difference where we have the pocket versus the envelope. So I'm going to use the gold embellished paper to cut a little decorative edge. It's not going to serve a function, it's not going to be like a belly band, but just for the decoration purposes to break it up. So I want to go about 4.5 inches wide, maybe a little bit less, just to leave room for the folds. In other words, when you go to fold it up, it will just unfold itself because it's just too bulky. And I don't need it to go too deep. I just want it to be like a line to show the difference between the two. So maybe an inch, inch and a half. I'm just getting over a cold, so if you hear me sniffling, I apologize. I'm trying to be conscious of it, but I've just got back to work now after a couple days of basically just laying in a coma. I think I slept for 14 hours straight at one point. Alright, so we have our belly band, we have our flap, which really breaks up that space well. I'm going to start gluing on. I need to have the band glued where the seams are because it is going to fold, and the flap needs to be glued pretty solidly on there because it's going to move up and down a lot and I don't want it to come off. So I'm going to do all the gluing of these pieces before I actually assemble the whole thing together, because it's a lot easier to make adjustments when it's not all glued together, if that makes sense. So I'm going to glue the individual pieces on, but not seal the 12 by 12 into envelopes yet. I still need to round the corners before I glue them on. It just looks more finished if everything's rounded, but I can't round them when they're all glued together. It's too thick, or at least with the tools I have. Now, you don't have to round the corners. I just tend to because I like the way it looks. I also need to put like a little notch in where I'm going to have the envelopes so that it's so you can grab things a little bit easier. I've went ahead and sewn some papers to one of the flaps to make a little notebook. I decided to do it before I glued everything in. It's hard to remember all the little details before you start gluing things in, but it's so much harder if you don't do it ahead of time. So I just used my sewing machine to stitch like 3 pages on, and then when it glues in, it looks a little nicer with the extra stitching. You could always add it as an afterthought. I'm gonna put some texture and interest on some of the paper that I'm gonna add to this. So I have some archival ink from Tim Holtz. I have a couple of sort of texture making just things I find around the house, and I have some stamps that have writing. I usually use the soft kind because I can roll the words onto the paper and have a little bit more control. It gives it kind of less of a really extreme line when you go to stamp on it. So I have the inside. I like to take the core of the cardboard to put lines. I'm gonna mix up a lot of these different types of textures, or whatever you want to call it. So I'll do some lines, I'll do some dots from bubble wrap. I love bubble wrap. I love putting different size dots from bubble wrap. I don't know what the attraction is for me, but it's fun. I usually do it last to kind of cover up all the other busyness. Or splatters can be fun too, to kind of add a little bit of a filler for all the space you don't get with other things. I'll do a few of these smaller dots. I do have this bigger type of bubble wrap that is fun to use. They're like huge circles, but I'll stick to the small stuff for this one. It's fun to do the different sizes though, and I just got the roll of the bigger stuff from a package I got from Christmas shopping. I think I'll do a little bit more of this with this green. I like the sort of earthy, dirty colors. But I'll do a little bit more off camera and then we'll come back. Here's the pretty much finished product. Let's see how it looks with the rest of the paper. I think that's a pretty good match. It's not overdone. Now I need to pick out some of the embellishments that I'm going to put on the envelope. I have a hodgepodge mix of different things I've found over time. A lot of them are Tim Holtz. There's some Papercraft brand from Hobby Lobby. I'll have to kind of scrounge through here and look for things that are related. I'm going for this sort of butterfly specimen type thing, so a lot of these will fit well. I probably have 1,000 butterflies in these boxes. I don't really like it when they have that white ring around them, so I'm gonna hunt for ones that are where the color's right to the edge. I try to avoid buying ones that have the white line, but it's harder to find those. Tim Holtz is great for having printed images that go all the way to the edge, or at least having a paper that's easy to age. Well, let me do a little bit of hunting and I'm going to pull out ones that fit. I've picked out a variety of different things and I'm going to add some brads to this project. So I have these larger brads that can be used. They're a little bit more artsy than the traditional ones. I have a few that will kind of fit the color scheme. I'll kind of decide as I start assembling it. I have a collection of different brads and like little weird metal embellishments that I've collected over the years. I'm also going to need some circles, so I'm going to use the brads through the circle and make a tab for a closure. I gotta find a good match for this paper though, so I have a bunch of different colors of red and some like printed paper that has like dragonflies and butterflies, so we'll find a couple of options here that kind of match. I cleared off my space so I can do some cutting. I'm gonna cut some pieces for the inside flap where I'm gonna have the envelope, and for the long edge that will be the flip up, and I just lined them up on the mat to measure out what I needed. You can see I did a little bit of an overlap, so it'll be the whole inside of the closure for the envelope and a little bit below. So where I punched out that tab, it will still be, it won't show white through. It'll have that patterned brown paper behind it. Now I'm going to put the crease in ahead of time, and just so that when I can fold it ahead of time, and then when I glue it in, the fold will line up nicely. I won't have a weird overhang. It's actually starting to come together now, even though I haven't glued anything in yet. We can see, like, if you line up the fold, there is a little bit of a white overhang. I didn't measure that completely perfectly, but at least it'll fold well, because if I don't fold it ahead of time, then the paper on the outside can end up splitting just because it makes it so thick. So I guess it's time to start gluing things on and making them permanent. I'm going to go through and glue on all the pieces that I've done so far. All of the parts are glued on that I had made already. Skipped over it so you don't have to watch me struggle with glue. Now I need to make my hinges with these brads. I'm trying to find the right ones to match all of my many patterns here. I'm going to put a closure for the envelope and for the longer thin fold up. So I just need to find a good match for each one. I do like the patterned circles, or the print ones with the prints, but the purplish color is pretty nice too. I'm gonna punch a hole to put the brad in, and I'm use this croc gator. What do they call them? If you don't have one like this, you might have to change some of your dimensions, but you could go from the side with a smaller punch. I'm going to draw out where I want it so it's centered as best as possible, but I'm kind of lazy. I never measure. I just want to make sure that it won't pucker up when you go to close it. So basically you're using the brad to hold the circle of cardstock in place, and it provides a way to close it softly without like dealing with any fancy like strings hanging off or anything like that. That might be a pain. This can be done with a smaller punch. I just have the bigger punch from doing like book bindings and things where you have to have it go down the page. I never get things centered. Oh, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do one on the other side for the envelope. Oh shoot. I didn't think about that. I guess I should have done this before I glued everything on too. I always forget about one detail like that. I try to do it all ahead of time before it's assembled, but didn't quite do that one in the right order. Well, I'm going to cover the end of the brad so it doesn't, things won't hang up on it when you go to tuck things into this tuck. So I'll do that before I reconnect, and I'm going to have to cover that hole I just punched into the belly band. Oh, I can't get it perfect, especially when there's a camera on you. There's always going to be a mistake. So I'll give that a second to dry, and then I've got to re-glue the end. Well, that could be a good cover. I have these little sayings kind of set aside for details. Oh, there, now you can't see my mistake. It's beautiful. So you see where I need the other brad put in for the envelope. Now I gotta make sure I don't make the same mistake and put a hole where I don't want it to be. It'll actually be covered because it'll be on the inside of the envelope, so not as big of a deal. This one would be a little bit harder to do without this bigger crock thing. I think if you had to make adjustments, you could make the flap a little bit shorter so that you could reach it better with a smaller punch. It doesn't have to be that dramatically long. I just do it because it kind of lines up with what I like, all the other folds. So it's yeah, I just give it lots of decorations and things when I have a big flap on there, but you can just cut that down to fit whatever tools you have. It is fun to have these big crock things because you can do a lot more with them. So but it is an expense. I can't remember how much they cost. Alright, so I'm going to find another circle that fits this area a little bit better. And I have to think about where the hole is going to be because it'll change what the design is. I think I can get it through the body of the image on here. Sorry, my head's in the way of the camera. It's hard to see with this crock where it lines up. It's just such a big tool, and when you're trying to videotape using it, it's super awkward. So we're gonna do the same thing when I fold the edges of the brad down. I have to cover them or else anything you tuck into the envelope is just gonna snag on it. So this is where all these extra circles come in handy. I really pre-punch these circles when I'm just like multitasking, watching a show or something, so I have them on hand when I need them. I don't know when I bumped the table, but you can see my pajama bottoms. It's getting close to Christmas, so it's time for Christmas pajamas, and I do craft in pajamas a lot. Sometimes I have an apron on to keep from ruining all my clothes, but a lot of times it's at night when I'm settled in, or early in the morning if it's a weekend and I have extra energy when I first wake up. I do have to kind of time it around the neighborhood animals because we have a lot of dogs in our community that go out in the morning and just bark at each other. So here's our finished, well, sort of finished project. I do need to punch those corners because I hate I like the super square looking. I'm gonna round them off and then we'll fold it up to see how it looks. We might have to recrease some things to get it to really fold up nicely. Yeah, this is a little bit of a tight fold. I don't want to have things split. Alright, we'll officially glue it together so it can't be undone. So now I'm just going to glue along the edges for each of the pockets. I try to do thin glue. You could use glitter glue with a fine tip and it probably would make a better envelope, but I'm just being lazy and using Fabri-Tac for everything. It means there'll be less space to tuck things because it does spread a little bit more, but it works. So now we can get an idea of how it's going to look when it folds up. It's super cute, but it does need more bling because this is kind of boring. So now I need to dig through all the stuff I found earlier and find a good home for all of it. I think maybe I should probably age the edges because I don't want that white edge, and I think I have to cut off some of the stuff that overlaps. So I'll trim off the white and do some aging of the paper. Okay, now I can add some bling. I'm gonna try to find good fits for the butterflies. It's kind of an earthy color, so I don't want things that are too loud or too much of a contrast. I also have these like they're the old medical type posters from Tim Holtz. I have some scraps. I glued one on the envelope and have a little bit of leftover from what came off the flap. I'm going to glue some of these butterflies down. In the other one I did, I had a bigger image that went all the way down. This one I'm not doing quite the same style. I'm going for like the smaller little add-ons, but the paper's super busy, so I don't feel like it needs as much as the other one did. I do want to put something here because it's kind of a bland. There's no texture to that paper. That's a bit much. I don't know. I don't think that's gonna really fit anywhere. I'm always hopeful. I've had that one thing of flowers forever, and I've never found. I think it's probably meant for like some wedding picture or something. It's kind of a weird shape. I'm sure I can find something better. Oh, that's better. Just like a simple, like kind of in line with the other circles that are out there. I'm gonna just commit because if I spend too much time thinking about it, then it just is a huge waste. Because I end up usually going with whatever the first thing was that I saw or liked in the first place. This is some busy work here of just fussing with all the little details now. I'm not sure what else it needs. We should see what we'll tuck in there. I have these are all from like Tim Holtz. I can't remember what their packs are called, but they have groupings of different like topics. Like you can get Christmas themed ones, you can get Halloween themed ones, circus. This one was field notes, I believe, and it's just a lot of like insect type chart things or the like flower, different labeled butterflies, that kind of thing. I gotta find something that will fit in here that won't snag on the brad that I do have that circle of paper over it, but it still hangs out a little bit, so I always end up pulling a bunch of these out and I only use like one or two, but I like to mess around and move things around and kind of try it out. I think there's another, there's a YouTuber out there that calls it rehearsing. It really does feel like that. It takes a while for me to commit and just go like, okay, this is what I'm putting here. Well, let's reseal this because I tore it off to try to fix that circle that was hanging out a little bit. And then we'll flip it over and add some bling to the other side. You can kind of take a look at how it will look when it's put together so you don't overdo it. And you do have to kind of feel out how they'll look together on both sides. But that center piece in the back I haven't done anything with, so I gotta figure out what I want there. I do have some more tucks that can go in, and that might be the best spot for the butterfly one. I don't know if I have anything that will fit in this envelope. It doesn't necessarily need to have something in it right away. Well, that could fit. Okay, well that will shut. It doesn't get in the way of the fold, so we'll stick with that. And now do I want something on that center band to kind of add a little bit of something? I don't know why I always try to find a place for that stupid flower thing. It doesn't fit anything. Oh. I glued the, or I didn't glue, I stitched the strip in the center, so there's a little bit of a tuck underneath too, so it gives me a little bit of freedom if I want to add some paper, or I want to have something just kind of hang out from the bottom. I do want to find a little inspiring quote here, so let me dig through my stuff. Okay, I know it's going to seem like I jumped ahead here, but you didn't want to watch me scurrying around, so I found some different sayings. I do have a Tim Holtz, like little quotes. It's like little cutouts from different books, so to save time, I just went that route, and I put it on the same paper that I used earlier, and I found ones that kind of fit sort of the inspiration I like to put in my journals. And I also found a picture that is a woman standing in a garden. It's a really popular vintage style like photo. It seems like there's a lot of portraits women took of themselves standing in their gardens and with their best clothes on. So I've added that, and I'm also going to add a little notebook that can tuck in. It doesn't have to be glued in because it's a really tight space where I put that little flap on, so you can just pull it out, write in it, and tuck it back in. And I'm going to add these sayings on kind of throughout. I like to have where the longer flap opens, I want to have some inspiring quotes so that you only see when you open it up. It's nice to have them like on the outside and on the inside. And this is some silk that I hand dyed when I was at a retreat. It's a little finicky. It shows every little bit of glue you put on it, so you have to be super careful. So what I'll do is strategically put the words over the spot where the glue hits the material, because it will inevitably look horrible if I don't. I haven't quite mastered how to glue silk down without it looking trashy. I'm just using Fabri-Tac, but I do rub it down as thinly as possible. It still seems to leak through no matter how thin I go with it. If anybody knows a secret, please share. I'm going to trim these down so they're not quite as bulky. I just kind of quickly clipped them out, but I want to fit them on material, so it's just not cardboard on cardboard looking, or whatever that paper bag color is, and I'll distress the edges so that it kind of creates a line and makes it more distinct. This can be such fiddly work. I'm making this have a flip. I don't know if I'll put anything underneath it, but at least there's some space for writing later on. Now I gotta do something to make these pop. I think I'm gonna put a edge of fabric around each of the little quotes, and it'll give it an edge to make it pop a little bit. One thing about this silk is you can just clip a little edge into it and tear it, and then it has that sort of rough edge without you having to work so hard to make it look frayed. There you go, that works. It definitely looks better with that material behind it. Doesn't blend so much into the background. It wasn't even planned how that silk was dyed. It just happens to go. I guess I'm kind of a creature of habit with my colors. I tend to go for like the earthy, almost fallish type colors. I'm still going to age the edges even though it's going to have the material behind it, just to keep everything cohesive. And we're nearly done here now once I get these glued. The same thing is true with this section. The glue is going to show through the silk, so when I go to glue them on, I have to make sure I glue behind the paper so that it doesn't show through the fabric. Now I just got to figure out what angles I want them at. I can sit and move them a million times and I never quite figure out what the best way is. But I tend to hate things that are perfectly symmetrical, so I go for the off-kilter look every time. Now when these dry, we can flip it up and see how the finished product will look. And I think it looks pretty sharp. I don't know if I'll want something on the outside of the flap though. Will it be too... I'm just gonna cut off these edges so that the overall envelope thing will fold up all the way. I don't want to have something right in the crease for the fold. I'm not gonna put anything in here. I'm just gonna wrap this up and see how it looks. I think it looks pretty finished, and when it's all folded up it looks like that. Perfect. I don't think it really needs anything more. We may need to add a little crease in there to make it fold better. I'm just gonna put like a double line. I just go over 1/8 of an inch and make another crease just to give it room for the bulkiness of all the folded papers. I just want to get it so that it can fold as flat as possible when it's in a junk journal without it popping open. You could take like a lace and tie it closed, use like a string and wrap it up. That could work. I think I'll use just a light lace. This is a very fine lace. If you were going to glue it into junk journal, you could leave that back part less fancy and just glue that in with the lace also glued to the page, and then it would stay there when you open it, or you can wind it around the circle and wrap it around. Yeah, so there's our finished product. I hope you like it as much as I do.